Most clutter after 60 isn't about things, it's about personality. The way you keep or release items says more about who you are than what's in your closet. And if decluttering feels impossible, it's not because you're lazy, it's because you've been ignoring your personality type. Think about the boxes in your attic, the drawers in your kitchen, or the closet that hasn't been touched in years. You might look at those piles and tell yourself it's just stuff you've been too busy to handle, or things you might need one day. But deep down, every object you've kept holds a hidden message about you. Maybe you save things because they remind you of a person or a place. Maybe you hold onto items out of fear that letting go means losing safety or security. Or maybe you've stacked up supplies for a dream you haven't started yet. Whatever the reason, the clutter isn't random, it's shaped by your personality, and unless you understand that, decluttering will always feel heavier than it should. The truth is, after 60, clutter carries a different kind of weight. It's not just the physical piles that make moving around your home harder, it's the emotional burden that comes with every decision. Should you keep that gift your friend gave you years ago? Should you hold on to that old appliance in case your grandkids need it? Should you keep the hobby supplies for the project you never started? These questions aren't about objects, they're about who you are, what you value, and what you fear losing. That's why generic decluttering advice never quite works. What frees one person can feel like punishment to another. But here's the good news. When you learn to declutter in a way that matches your personality, everything shifts. Instead of battling guilt or second-guessing yourself, you'll finally feel at peace with your choices. You'll keep what truly matters and release what's weighing you down. If that feels true, tap like right now and subscribe to Wise Aging Seniors, because today's story might finally unlock why decluttering has felt so hard. Meet Ephraim Calder, 71, a retired jazz musician from New Orleans whose life has always been measured in rhythms, melodies, and memories. Step into his home and it feels like you've entered a living museum of his past. Trumpets rest silently in corners, stacks of sheet music lean against walls, and colorful festival posters peel gently at the edges, reminders of stages he once lit up with sound. There are ticket stubs from smoky clubs, faded photographs of bandmates long gone, and souvenirs picked up in cities he barely remembers but can never forget. To Ephraim, each object isn't clutter, it's a note in the song of his life. Every pile hums with its own kind of music, and parting with even one feels like losing a verse of who he is. But there's a problem Ephraim can no longer ignore. The home that once felt vibrant has become suffocating. What started as keepsakes has grown into boxes, stacks, and piles that now crowd out his daily living. Moving from room to room is no longer smooth and easy, it's an obstacle course. His favorite chair is buried under scarves and fan gifts. His hallway, once echoing with the sound of his saxophone, is lined with cases and crates that force him to shuffle sideways just to pass. Friends stopped visiting years ago, not because they don't love him, but because there's no space left to sit. Even his grandchildren hesitate when they come by. They don't see a warm home, they see a maze. Ephraim isn't just messy. His clutter isn't about laziness or neglect. It's a reflection of the many sides of his personality. Each stack represents a different story he tells himself. A keeper of memories, a protector of just in case, a dreamer of projects yet to come, a grateful receiver of gifts, a guardian of family legacy, and sometimes, a prisoner of guilt over money spent. To him, every object has a voice, and together, they've been drowning him in a noise he can no longer escape. What makes Ephraim's struggle so powerful, and so relatable, is that his clutter is deeply human. Many seniors in their 60s, 70s, and beyond find themselves facing the same dilemma. After decades of living, how do you sort through the physical evidence of an entire life? How do you decide what to keep, what to release, and how to do it without feeling like you're cutting away a part of yourself? The turning point for Ephraim came when he realized he didn't have to declutter like everyone else. He didn't need to follow some generic checklist or force himself to throw out 10 things a day. Instead, he began to see that decluttering had to match his personality, not fight against it. Once he embraced that truth, the process stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like freedom. Ephraim's journey teaches us something vital. Clutter isn't just junk lying around. It's a mirror of who you are and how you've lived. And when you approach decluttering with that in mind, letting go doesn't mean losing yourself, it means finding the space to live the next chapter fully. Ephraim's story unfolds in 6 powerful ways that show how he managed to let go without erasing himself. And through his story, you may see your own. Way 1. The Memory Keeper. Ephraim's first struggle was with the little things most people wouldn't even notice: paper wristbands from festivals, crumpled ticket stubs from smoky clubs, napkins scrawled with phone numbers and signatures of musicians he once played alongside. To an outsider, they looked like trash, scraps that should have been tossed decades ago. But to Ephraim, each one carried the weight of a night he never wanted to forget. The napkin wasn't just paper, it was the night he jammed with a saxophonist who pushed him to play harder. The faded wristband wasn't plastic, it was the summer he felt alive on stage in front of thousands. These items were proof that he had lived fully, that he had mattered in a world where music was everything. The problem was, those scraps weren't in a neat album or a tidy drawer. They were everywhere, overflowing showboxes in his closet, spilling out of folders, hidden between stacks of sheet music. The memories he cherished had multiplied into clutter that swallowed his space. Each time he thought about sorting them, his chest tightened. What if throwing away that ticket stub meant losing the memory of the night forever? What if letting go of that napkin was like erasing the man who signed it? This is the silent weight many seniors carry. After 60, objects aren't just objects. They are anchors to people, places, and seasons of life that feel further away each year. For Ephraim, clutter wasn't about laziness. It was about fear. The fear that without the things, the memories might vanish too. And isn't that something we all relate to? Think about the drawer of birthday cards you've kept, or the stack of old photographs you haven't looked at in years. They sit there, not because you need them every day, but because you believe they are the last thread tying you to moments you can't relive. Ephraim realized he couldn't keep living in a house where memory and mess had become the same thing. So, he took a different approach. Instead of forcing himself to throw it all away, he chose a few meaningful pieces: the ticket from his very first jazz festival, the wristband from his last big performance, and the napkin signed by the friend who taught him how to improvise, and he framed them together in a memory collage. For the first time, those scraps weren't hidden in boxes. They were displayed proudly, honoring the life he lived. The rest, he digitized. His grandson helped him scan each piece, uploading them into a digital archive where the stories would never fade. Ephraim even recorded voice notes, telling the story behind each one. Suddenly, the memories weren't trapped in boxes, they were alive, accessible, and ready to be passed down. What made the difference wasn't the act of decluttering, it was the shift in perspective. Ephraim stopped seeing those objects as the memory itself. He started seeing them as reminders of a memory he already carried. By honoring a few and preserving the rest in another way, he was able to let go without losing the stories that defined him. This is the heart of decluttering for memory keepers. It's not about erasing the past, it's about choosing how to carry it into the future. And here's where it comes back to you. Do you hold on to things because you're scared of losing the memories? Maybe it's your wedding invitation, your child's first report card, or that souvenir from a trip that changed your life. Which one object in your home feels impossible to release because of the story it carries? Share it in the comments. You may discover you're not the only one holding on to memory through clutter. Because when you learn to keep the story but not the stack, you don't just free up space in your home. You free up space in your heart. And just like Ephraim, you begin to see that your life was never stored in boxes. It has always been alive in you. Way 2. The Protector. In one of Ephraim's back rooms, there was a mountain of equipment stacked floor to ceiling: spare amplifiers, broken microphones, tangled cords, and soundboards that hadn't worked in years. To most people, it looked like junk. To Ephraim, it was insurance. He told himself he might need them one day. Maybe an amp would fail during a practice session, or perhaps a microphone could be repaired and used again. Each piece felt like a backup, a safety net for an uncertain future. And so, year after year, the pile grew taller. This is the heart of the Protector's clutter. It's not about greed or even sentiment, it's about fear of not being prepared. For Ephraim, the thought of tossing those items wasn't just uncomfortable, it was terrifying. What if he needed them the very next week? What if something broke and he had already given away the backup? That just-in-case mindset is powerful, and for many seniors it's familiar. After all, this generation lived through seasons of scarcity, wars, recessions, moments when replacing something wasn't easy. Holding onto extras was a survival skill, a way of ensuring you never got caught unprepared. But over time, Ephraim's safety net became a trap. The broken gear didn't make him safer, it crowded his space and filled his mind with constant worry. Every time he walked past the pile, he felt both comforted and weighed down. Deep inside, he knew he'd never use most of it again. The amps were outdated, the cords brittle, the microphones beyond repair. They weren't backups anymore, they were barriers to living freely in his own home. One turning point came when his daughter asked him a simple question. "Dad, if something breaks, wouldn't you want the best equipment available, not the broken one from your closet?" That struck him. She was right. By clinging to the old, he wasn't protecting himself, he was keeping himself stuck in the past. So Ephraim made a choice. Instead of letting the pile rot away, he gathered the working items and donated them to a local youth music program. The students, many of whom couldn't afford proper gear, treated those amps and cords like treasures. What once sat unused in Ephraim's home was suddenly helping a new generation discover the joy of music. His instinct to protect didn't disappear, it transformed. He wasn't stockpiling for a what-if anymore. He was actively protecting the future by giving others tools to grow. This shift freed more than his home, it freed his mind. He no longer felt the silent guilt of hoarding broken things. Instead, he felt pride knowing his belongings had a purpose beyond gathering dust. Have you ever kept something broken, thinking you might need it later? Be honest, because so many of us have. The truth is, most of those just-in-case items never get used. But when you pass them on, when you turn them into a blessing for someone else, you protect more than yourself. You protect the spirit of community, the hope of the next generation, and the peace of your own home. That's the real power of letting go. Way 3. The Dreamer. On a tall wooden shelf in Ephraim's study sat a tower of blank journals, their leather covers stiff and untouched, their pages still crisp and white. Next to them were stacks of songbooks, unopened and unmarked, waiting for melodies that never came. To anyone else, they might look like supplies, but to Ephraim, they represented something far bigger, dreams. The autobiography he always told himself he would write, the lyrics he promised he would set to music, the reflections he thought he'd put down once life finally slowed. Each untouched book wasn't just paper, it was a vision of a life still possible, a reminder of goals that never quite left his heart. But there was a hidden problem. The pile didn't inspire him, it overwhelmed him. Every time he looked at those journals, he felt the pressure of promises unkept. The sheer number made the dream feel impossible. Where would he even start? Which notebook should he open first? Instead of encouragement, the sight of them became a weight. The clutter didn't just fill his shelves, it filled his mind with guilt. He wasn't just keeping journals, he was keeping reminders of what he hadn't done. This is the struggle of the dreamer's clutter. It isn't about holding on to the past, it's about clinging to the future. Many seniors find themselves surrounded by supplies for projects they once swore they'd complete. Boxes of yarn for the knitting class never started. Paintbrushes for the landscapes never painted. Gardening tools for the patch of soil that never saw a seed. These objects don't just take up space, they whisper someday, while silently reminding you that someday hasn't come. Ephraim knew he couldn't keep carrying that guilt. So he made a choice. He kept just one journal, the one with a deep blue cover that had always caught his eye. He opened it, wrote his name on the first page, and committed to filling it with his life story, one entry at a time. The rest of the stack he donated to a local community center, where seniors and young people alike could pick up a journal and start their own story. Suddenly, his dream no longer felt like a burden, it felt possible. With fewer choices, there was no pressure to be perfect. There was just the next page, waiting to be written. This shift was more than decluttering, it was transformation. By releasing the excess, Ephraim turned an overwhelming dream into an achievable one. And the supplies he let go didn't represent failure, they became opportunities for others to chase dreams of their own. What about you? What project have you been saving supplies for but haven't started yet? Is it fabric for quilts, books for a class you meant to take, or tools for a hobby that's still on your someday list? Drop it in the comments. We're all guilty of this one. And remember, starting doesn't mean finishing everything at once. Sometimes, starting means keeping one notebook, one canvas, one seed. Because the dream doesn't come alive in the stack. It comes alive in the doing. Way 4, the giver. If you stepped into Ephraim's living room, the first thing you'd notice wasn't the music posters or the instruments, it was the shelves, packed from end to end with mugs, scarves, trinkets, and souvenirs. Each one had been given to him by someone over the years, a fan who wanted to thank him after a show, a bandmate who picked something up on tour, a friend who thought of him during the holidays. To Ephraim, these weren't just objects. They were symbols of love, respect, and connection. And that's why the shelves kept filling, year after year. He couldn't say no when someone handed him a gift, and he couldn't let go once it was in his home. The thought of parting with them filled him with guilt. What if getting rid of that mug felt like rejecting the person who gave it? What if donating that scarf seemed like throwing away the friendship itself? For Ephraim, the gifts were sacred, and his home became a shrine to every moment someone showed him kindness. But slowly, those tokens of affection began to overwhelm him. The shelves grew heavy, the walls cluttered, and the joy of receiving turned into the burden of keeping. This is the challenge of the giver's clutter. Many seniors face it. Decades of birthdays, holidays, retirement parties, and tokens of appreciation pile up, not because they are needed, but because each one feels tied to a person's heart. It feels wrong to let them go, even when they're no longer useful or wanted. And yet, keeping everything can turn love into weight. Ephraim discovered a way forward that didn't feel like betrayal. Instead of forcing himself to choose between guilt and release, he created what he called a gratitude ritual. Before donating an item, he would photograph it, then write down the name of the person who gave it to him and the memory attached to it. In this way, the essence of the gift, the gratitude, the story, the love, was preserved, even if the physical object was released. Once he had honored it, he could let it go without shame. The mugs and scarves began to leave his shelves, not as abandoned trinkets, but as blessings passed on to others who could use them. Something unexpected happened. By clearing space, Ephraim didn't feel further from the people who had given him those gifts. He felt closer, because now the memories weren't buried under piles of objects. They were alive, written down, captured, and shared. His shelves looked lighter, and his spirit felt freer. Do you struggle to let go of gifts? Would a gratitude ritual make it easier for you? Imagine taking a photo of that old vase, writing down who gave it to you, and why it mattered, before passing it along to someone who needs it more. You're not rejecting the person, you're honoring them. And just like Ephraim learned, sometimes the greatest way to show gratitude is to release the object, while keeping the love. Way 5. The Guardian of Legacy. At the very back of Ephraim's closet, beneath layers of dust and years of avoidance, lay two things he could never bring himself to part with: his father's trumpet and his mother's wide-brimmed church hats. The trumpet was tarnished, its once bright brass now dulled by time, but to Ephraim it wasn't just an instrument. It was the sound of his childhood, the voice that filled his home long before he played his own first note. The hats, elegant and carefully stored in their boxes, weren't just clothing. They were symbols of Sundays when his mother walked with grace into the pews, her head held high, her presence unforgettable. These items connected him to his roots, his history, his very identity. And yet, every time he opened the closet, he felt the weight. Keeping those heirlooms boxed away didn't honor them, it trapped them. They weren't being played, worn, or celebrated. They were silently collecting dust, hidden away from the very family that could have cherished them most. Ephraim realized that in trying so hard to preserve his family's story, he had accidentally locked it in a vault that no one else could access. His legacy wasn't alive, it was buried. This is the heart of the Guardian of Legacy's clutter. Seniors often find themselves overwhelmed with objects inherited from parents, grandparents, or even old friends. These things feel sacred, and letting them go feels unthinkable. But storing them away indefinitely doesn't preserve history. It stalls it. Objects that should be part of living memory instead become stagnant reminders tucked into closets and attics. Ephraim decided something had to change. So, he invited his grandchildren over for what he called a legacy day. Instead of keeping the trumpet locked away, he brought it out, told the story of his father playing it in the late-night clubs of New Orleans, and let his grandson hold it for the first time. The boy's eyes lit up, as though the music of the past had found its way into his hands. Then he brought out the hats, sharing how his mother's confidence inspired him to carry himself with dignity on stage. His granddaughter tried one on, twirling in front of the mirror, giggling but also honoring the elegance it represented. By the end of the day, each grandchild chose one item to keep, turning family heirlooms into living connections. The rest Ephraim carefully archived. He photographed each hat, recorded a short video explaining its history, and digitized the music sheets that had accompanied his father's trumpet. What once sat hidden in boxes now became part of a digital archive accessible to the whole family, ensuring the stories could be remembered and retold long after he was gone. For the first time, Ephraim didn't feel stuck between two painful choices, keeping everything or throwing it away. He realized legacy doesn't live in the objects themselves. It lives in the stories we share, the people we involve, and the memories we pass down. By turning his closet into a celebration instead of a storage space, his family history came alive. If you had to pass down just one item to your family, what would it be? Share it below. Maybe it's a watch, a recipe, a piece of jewelry, or a photograph. The item matters, but what matters more is the story behind it. Because legacy isn't about holding on to everything, it's about passing on what truly keeps your family's story alive. Way 6. The Phantom Collector. At the back of one of Ephraim's closets sat something that had haunted him for years, an expensive electronic keyboard. When he first bought it, he imagined himself learning new sounds, experimenting with digital layers, and maybe even recording a small album from home. He had the best of intentions. But life happened. The keyboard stayed in its box, untouched, gathering dust. Every time he opened the closet and saw it, a wave of guilt hit him. He thought, how could I waste money like that? Maybe one day I'll use it. I can't just give it away. This is the trap of the phantom collector, holding onto items not because they're useful, not because they carry memories, but because they represent money spent, potential wasted, or dreams never fulfilled. For Ephraim, the keyboard was no longer an instrument, it was a symbol of guilt. Instead of inspiring him, it reminded him of what he hadn't done. And that guilt made it impossible to let go. Many seniors know this feeling. Maybe it's the exercise machine that turned into a coat rack, the expensive sewing machine that never threaded a single needle, or the set of golf clubs still sitting in the garage. These items don't just take up space, they whisper accusations. You spent too much. You promised you'd use me. Now look at me. And so, we keep them, hoping that one day we'll make the purchase worthwhile. But years pass, and that day rarely comes. Ephraim realized keeping the keyboard wasn't making him more responsible, it was chaining him to regret. So he made a bold decision. Instead of letting guilt keep him prisoner, he listed the keyboard on a senior-friendly resale app. Within days, another musician bought it, excited to give it the life Ephraim never could. The money he earned wasn't just a financial return, it was emotional relief. The shame he had carried turned into a sense of closure. He didn't lose. He simply passed it on to someone who could actually use it. The transformation was powerful. By letting go, Ephraim learned an important truth. Money spent in the past is gone. Clinging to the object doesn't bring it back. All it does is take up space and energy in the present. When he finally released the keyboard, he also released the guilt. His closet was lighter, but more importantly, his heart was lighter too. Have you ever felt guilty about tossing or selling something you barely used? Let us know, we've all been there. The reality is, keeping those phantom possessions doesn't fix the mistake. It only keeps you stuck in it. The real freedom comes when you forgive yourself, let go, and allow those items to serve someone else. Because decluttering isn't about punishing yourself for past choices, it's about creating space for the life you still have ahead. Ephraim's house is no longer the obstacle course it once was. The narrow hallways that used to be lined with boxes and stacks now feel open, welcoming, and full of light. His favorite chair, once buried under piles of scarves and souvenirs, is clear again, ready for him to sit and play his saxophone, or simply enjoy the quiet. For years, clutter had been like a second occupant in his home, crowding out his comfort and overshadowing his memories. But now, the same house breathes with new life. It isn't emptiness he feels, it's relief, space, and peace. What changed wasn't just the physical act of decluttering. Ephraim didn't strip his home bare or erase his past. He approached the process in a way that matched who he was. As a memory keeper, he framed the moments that mattered most. As a protector, he passed his extras on to people who needed them. As a dreamer, he chose one project and let the others go. As a giver, he practiced gratitude instead of guilt. As a guardian of legacy, he invited his family into the story. And as a phantom collector, he forgave himself and let go of regret. Decluttering according to his personality meant he didn't lose himself in the process, he found himself again. And that's what makes his story so powerful. Decluttering after 60 isn't about living with less for the sake of less. It's about living with freedom. It's about creating a home that reflects not only where you've been, but where you're going. Because at this stage of life, your space should support you, not weigh you down. Your home should feel like a sanctuary, not a storage unit. Every item you release is more than space gained. It's peace gained, clarity gained, and dignity restored. If Ephraim's story struck a chord with you, don't just watch and move on. Tap like right now. It tells YouTube this message matters and helps it reach more seniors who feel the same weight. Share this video with a friend over 60 who deserves peace, and subscribe to Wise Aging Seniors, because decluttering isn't about losing things. It's about gaining back your freedom and creating a life that feels lighter, calmer, and more alive than ever before.